What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some insane battles in the Open Great League with a triple buffed Centipede theme team featuring Shadow Scolipede, which gained access to Octel this season, as well as both Center Scorch and a level 51 Best Buddy boosted Hundo Sizzlipede, both running the newly buffed Heatwave. Now again, I do want to apologize about my voice, I do have a bit of a sore throat. Hopefully you can still get through the video. Worst case scenario, you can just mute it and watch the battles, because trust me, the battles are worth watching. Now the first time I tried to run this team this season, I went 0-5, hard losing every single game, and I gave up after just that one set. But I saw a few of you guys asking in the comments, where are the Centipedes at? So I gave it another try, and I'm so glad I did, because some of these battles are absolutely ridiculous. Now this goes without saying, so many Pokemon completely core break the entire team, but one thing I really did enjoy about this team is that it hard beats Wigglytuff, my least favorite Pokemon of all time, and several trainers actually conceded the match the second I brought in my Sizzlipede, which was really satisfying to see. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. What is your least favorite GBL Pokemon of all time, and what is your favorite Pokemon / team you like to run to completely destroy it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Shadow Scolipede into Azumarill. Now, this is actually a matchup that gets worse this season if you run this moveset with Octel and X-Scissor, because unfortunately, Azumarill is going to completely wall the charge moves. Whilst, yes, you are a Poison-type Pokemon, it is a bit frustrating here not to be able to take out an Azumarill with a Poison-type. But we go for X-Scissor. That is persistent damage. It does respectable damage there, but unfortunately, I will have to throw 3 of them to get the KO. So what I'm actually going to do, fire off the next one, then swap out and catch an Ice Beam, which is going to be resisted onto my Center Scorch. Ice Beam, of course, not going to do too much damage, and now they come in with a Bullet Seed Credilli. I'm going to double resist the Bullet Seed damage there. I go for lunge. I tried to throw on CMP. The opponent actually doesn't get a 0-turn swap there, meaning Rock Tomb going to KO. That's fine with me. I can now come back in with Scolipede where we are loaded on energy, and actually, I probably don't need to go for an X, as Octel is going to be neutral damage, so Octel going to grab a shield there from the opponent before they swap into a Talonflame. And certainly, Octel is going to be very useful coverage in this matchup. Previously, Talonflame completely destroys this team, but you're going to see Octel does huge damage, but does that put them into Ember Farm Dam range? It's going to be super close here. The opponent is actually going to full send a Brave Bird, and that means I can easily Ember Farm them down. I come out with decent energy as well, and decent health, meaning I can farm up to back-to-back Heat Waves. First one will be resisted, but it takes out Azumarill, and the second Heat Wave will be more than enough damage to take out the Credilli, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into next battle. You can see Whimsicott in the lead. A great matchup for me. The opponent is going to be swapping out into Swampert. And Swampert, a bit of an issue for me, just because all of my fast food damage is going to be resisted. However, X-Scissor is going to hit fairly hard, and the opponent overfarming massively, allowing me to reach a second X-Scissor, grabbing a shield and dealing big damage. However, I kind of need to shield here, in which case I'm going to have to double shield. I don't necessarily need to maintain alignment, but I do need to put Swampert into range where I can actually take them out. With the fast food pressure and Poison Sting from Shadow Scolipede, going to do slightly more damage than the Embers from my backline. Either way, the opponent lets that go down before coming in with Alolan Marowak. However, unfortunately, they've seen Octel already. Octel is going to be shielded, and now we're going to come in with the Sizzlipede. Of course, we do have crunch coverage here, and because I am a fire and bug type Pokemon, I'm only taking neutral damage from the fast food pressure. We're able to reach the crunch. Crunch is going to deal decent damage, but unfortunately not quite enough to put them into range where, honestly, even a Heat Wave KOs. So the opponent is going to, well, actually, never mind. We probably will get the KO with a Heat Wave right now. The opponent going to fire off the charge move. They go for Shadow Bone, but they swap back into Whimsicott. And once again, I farm up to back-to-back Heat Waves here. First one will easily be super effective. It takes out the Whimsicott, but resisted damage. Does it KO from this range? Yes, it does. And I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. I'm going to see Fortress in the leads, of course. I've got 2 fire types in the back. I say swap straight away into my Center Scorch, and the opponent does make a very nice catch there, unfortunately catching a Heat Wave. But they end up shielding anyways, maybe expecting a Crunch there, as previously Crunch would be the secondary charge move you would run alongside Lunge. We go for another Heat Wave, unfortunately really not doing too much damage, but we do force them to throw some energy, so I don't mind that. I'm actually going to shield this just because I realize at this point I can maybe grab another shield from from the opponent, and the opponent is going to do exactly that. They end up shielding, and I swap into Scolipede. Of course, we do have Octel full coverage. I hope the opponent does just stay in here, in which case I'm able to outpace, reach the Aquatel. Aquatel is super effective. It gets the KO there, but unfortunately they come in with Jellicent, a Pokemon that is going to pretty much completely wall the entire team outside of Crunch from my Sizzlipede. Now we go for X's and we throw on CMP. That is great for me as the opponent does throw straight away, and they full send a Shadow Ball. That's going to mean it's going to take 4 more hexes to reach the next charge move, in which case I'm going to swap out after 6 embers, catch the charge move onto my Center Scorch here, but will I be able to put them into range where Crunch gets the KO? It's going to be super close. I need a Heat Wave for the Fortress, so I go for Crunch at the last second, and no, it just barely does not get the KO there. That was agonizingly close because, of course, Heat Wave, double super effective into Fortress, that would have easily got the one shot, but unfortunately, I do lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see a Shelgon in the lead. I'm going to stay in this matchup here. Going to go straight for an X's. Well, I say straight for it. I do overfarm just a little bit to throw them off, and the opponent ends up throwing on CMP. So I'm definitely going to shield this. The opponent full sends a Flamethrower, which I do think is pretty much overkill here up against Scolipede. Scolipede, especially in its shadow form, is quite a glassy Pokemon. But X's doesn't KO. We do get the Poison Sting snipe there as they come in with a Dust Noir. So I'm going to go for an Aquatel here, and then I'm probably going to swap straight away into my Sizzlipede as I do have access to Crunch. I should also be able to live a Shadow Punch here relatively comfortably, but I do not live the Astonish damage. I was certain I could throw one more Ember and go for a Crunch, and that backfires massively as I lose the energy. Crunch, if it didn't KO, would have put them into Ember farm down range, whereas now I'm going to be forced to use another charge move. However, their final Pokemon is Venusaur. So you know what? Heat Wave, I'm going to fully charge it, and it puts them into perfect farm down range. We can now go for one more Ember. This time around, we can get away with going for good timing. Heat Wave gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent is the next battle. We're going to see another Fortress in the lead. So once again, going to be swapping, this time actually into my Sizzlipede as they come in with a shiny Shadow Gyarados. So I'm going to go straight for Crunch. Crunch is going to connect there, does decent damage, but the opponent is going to farm up to pretty much back-to-back charge moves, and Aquatel will, of course, get the KO. Now I'm going to come in with the Scolipede, and I'm actually able to throw and win CMP up against the Gyarados as the opponent does not throw straight away. Actually, never mind, they just didn't throw at all, but they farm up once again to back-to-back Aquatel, so unfortunately, I do just have the no shield here. The opponent swaps back into Fortress, which is fine with me, as of course, we've got Center Scorch. I go straight for Heat Wave. Heat Wave is going to grab the final shield there. Arguably, could have gone for Lunge there, but of course, this is such a bad matchup for them. I assumed maybe they would just no shield that. Either way, they go for a Sand Team, debuffing my defense stat, meaning I have to throw on CMP. Heat Wave gets the KO there. Gyarados does still have a charge move loaded, but now it just depends what they have in the back. They go for Aquatel, but unfortunately it's going to be a Quagsire. And whilst yes, I can go for a Lunge, Lunge is going to drop their attack stat. My defense has already been debuffed. Aquatel is going to hit for super effective damage. Unfortunately, Aquatel will get the KO, and I do end up losing that game. But GG's opponent into the next battle, we're going to see a Wigglytuff in the lead. So this is a great Pokemon to see in the lead here. We are very spammy with the Aquatels. I'm going to go for the first one. Aquatel number 1, going to be shielded, and now I can go for a second Aquatel. Now, if this does connect, it won't quite KO, so I'm going to actually swap into my Sizzlipede and catch what I'm expecting to be an Icy Wind. It is the Icy Wind. The opponent's now going to swap into a Politoed, which is obviously not great for me, but they do allow me to reach a Crunch first, and Crunch is debuffed. It's non-stab. It doesn't do much damage, but the opponent doesn't really overfarm by much. So Weather Ball is going to get the KO. We can come back in with a Scolipede, and I'm certainly going to have to shield here. I'm not actually certain if a Lunge would KO from this range from my Center Scorch, so I'm definitely going to stay in this matchup, fire off the X-Scissor. X-Scissor will be more than enough damage to take out the Politoed, but they come in with a Alolan Marowak, and unfortunately, I feel like they're probably going to shield in this matchup, and they do exactly that. I've now only got resisted charge boost to throw, but if the opponent ends ends up swapping back into Wigglytuff, I could have a sliver of hope. And the opponent, they do exactly that there. There is huge for me, as now we come out with, well, very close to 100 energy. We're going to go for a Heat Wave here. Heat Wave, unfortunately, not going to do much damage. I will need 3 Heat Waves plus a few more Embers to get the KO. But if I'm able to make a catch here, which I'm able to do, maybe, that is the lifeline that I needed. Bone Club gets the KO. We're actually 2 away from the next Heat Wave, but we get there in time. Is this enough damage? Yes, it is. And I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. We're going to see a Shadow Scolipede into Skeledirge. Of course, not a great matchup for me, but we do have access to Aqua Tail. It just depends if they're going to shield or not. If this does connect, it will eventually put them into Ember Farm Down range, but the opponent going to shield the first. Are they going to double shield the Skeledirge? It's going to be very frustrating if they do, and unfortunately, the opponent does exactly that. At this point, I have to just no-shield this. Very likely they go for Torch Song, going to boost up their attack stat, which they do, but that is going to allow me to reach a Crunch. Now, Crunch isn't going to do as much damage as the Shadow Octel from Scolipede, but it does get them fairly low. However, unfortunately, they're going to come in with another very hard answer to the entire team in the form of Dunsparce, where, of course, rollouts, they are double super effective. Rock Sides, also double super effective. At this point, I'm actually going to look to overfarm here. I realize I probably win CMP up against the Skeledirge with my Center Scorch, so I'm going to look to farm up to back-to-back, and actually even slightly more than that as we go for a Heat Wave here. Heat Wave will now be enough to take out the Dunsparce. If they come back in with the Skeledirge, I will throw straight away, and they do, but they actually go for the extra Incinerate, so I guess technically I could have gone for 1 extra fast move there, and unfortunately, because we didn't, we miss out on the Charge Move. I don't think Heat Wave takes out Shadow Annihilate, unfortunately, but either way, we do end up losing that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. I'm going to see a Wigglytuff in the lead. So, once again, great lead matchup for me. They're going to say swap into a shiny Galarian Moltres, but I'm so far ahead on energy, I can go straight for Exeter, and now I can actually get the KO with an Aqua Tail. So, Aqua Tail is going to be getting a shield here from the opponent, and this one, my entire team's good into Wigglytuff, so I don't necessarily need switch advantage. The opponent goes for an undercharge there, but that's fine with me, as now I can come in with the Center Scorch, and I'm going straight for Lunge. Lunge going to debuff their attack stat, they're going to no shield, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Gourgeist. Now here, I'm going to look to throw a Heat Wave, throwing just before they reach a potential Shadow Ball. Heat Wave is going to be no shielded. It pretty much gets the KO there, which means I can just safely shield up the Shadow Ball. They swap back into Wigglytuff. I'm going to go for a Heat Wave, and then I will be swapping into my Sizzlipede. Heat Wave is going to connect. Once again, we swap into Sizzlipede. The opponent recognizing there is nothing they can do there, and so they just concede the match. Alright, so GG's to the opponent there into the next battle. Going to see Astonish Dunsparce. That is huge for me because rollouts would be a complete nightmare for the team. I go for X-Scissor. X-Scissor does decent damage. It will be enough damage to two-shot them. So I'm now going to shield the Rock Slide, and now I'm actually going to bait with an Aqua Tail. I don't think this will quite KO, but it probably puts them into farm down range. They're going to use a shield, and you know what? I might as well just full send the X's this time around. Just guarantee the KO as we throw on CMP, and the opponent is going to no shield. They then come in with a Charm Shadow Alola Ninetales. That is fine with me. I go straight for Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail going to be shielded by the opponent as they Charm Farm me all the way down. Now I'm going to shield here, could be a Chilling Water potentially, so I'm going to shield, and it is actually a Psyshock bait there, which is interesting to see, but they're going to swap into Greninja. We can go for Lunge here. Lunge, unfortunately, won't quite get the KO, but I swap into Sizzlipede, just fully sacrificing it. The opponent goes for Hydro Cannon, which doesn't KO after the debuff, but it puts them into 1 Ember farm down range, meaning we can come back in, we can go straight for the Heat Wave. Heat Wave is super effective into Alola Ninetales. It easily gets the KO, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent into the next battle. I'm going to see Jellicent in the lead. Not a great matchup for me, and kind of interesting, but I'm swapping into Sizzlipede because this is the only Pokemon I have that can deal anything other than resisted damage, and actually Crunch is going to be enough damage, as you can see, to two-shot them. So, honestly, not that bad of a matchup. Of course, they're going to be on Surf. Surf is going to one-shot me pretty much, especially with the Hex damage adding up over time. But honestly, if I can just grab shields from the opponent, then it's not the worst thing ever. So, I'm going to shield the next charge as the opponent is going to go for another Surf. but unfortunately they end up swapping into Greedent. Now honestly, at this point, I probably should have swapped out of this matchup, banked the Crunch there, because Crunch is going to be useful into Jellicent, but instead I end up going for Heat Wave, which from Centipede isn't going to be enough damage to two-shot the Greedent either, so yeah, definitely shouldn't have thrown the Charge Move. Either way, we're going to go for another Heat Wave. Heat Wave does get them very low, but unfortunately not low enough to KO before they get to the next Body Slam. They swap back into a Shelgon, and we can just barely reach a Lunge. Lunge is going to drop their attack stat, and it does get them close to the L health range, where just one more Poison Sting does. Of course, they're now debuffed here. The opponent is not going to go for a Flamethrower, instead just going for Twister. I swap out, I make a catch. I'm not sure if that was the right play, because we still had quite a lot of health here, whereas now, unfortunately, I'm just way too low. I'm going to go for an Octail. Octail should KO even resisted, but it doesn't really matter at this point. They can come back in with Adjustment. They've still got a shield in play. Octail wouldn't KO anyways. They can X-Farm me down, and unfortunately, I do lose that game. So, GG's to them into next battle. I don't know why I'm saying GG's to that opponent there as fast as I can, and like, honestly, the words aren't even coming out of my mouth. Anyways, we're going to see a Whiscash in the lead, oh, sorry, a Wigglytuff in the lead. They say swap into Whiscash. You're going to have to excuse me here. We are going to shield a Scald, but unfortunately they end up debuffing my attack stat. So I'm going to go for an X-Scissor. X-Scissor going to be shielded by the opponent, and that is a CMP time. I'm now going to double shield. I swap into my Sizzlipede. They swap back into Wigglytuff, and once again, as soon as they see Sizzlipede, they just instantly concede the match there. GG to that trainer into the next battle. We're going to see Flamigo in the lead now. If this was last season where they'd be on double kick, honestly, not a bad matchup for me at all. But because they're on wing attack, this is so much worse. At this point, even double resisted, I think upper hand probably KOs anyway. So I am going to shield this, and then that will allow me to reach another Aquatail. Octail is going to be shielded, and now I swap into my Sizzlipede. Now, basically, I'm just forcing them to full send a Brave Bird here, and the opponent is going to do exactly that, unfortunately. But they are going to drop their defense by 3 stages, meaning I can come in with a Center Scorch, and they are kind of forced to swap out, but they're going to come in with a Greedent. Now, we already know 2 Heat Waves is pretty much going to be allowing me to go for a farm down with the Ember damage here and take out the Greedent, whereas if I go for Lunge, that unfortunately makes the farm down quite a bit more awkward for me. So at this point, I'm actually going to look to possibly swap and catch the next Charge Move. Nope, never mind. Just disregard what I said there. Instead, I'm going to go for the Heat Wave. Heat Wave does get the KO there. And the opponent's going to come in with a Credilli now. I make a huge mistake here. I should have just swapped out straight away into Scolipede. If I do, of course, I'm resisting the acid damage. Whereas now, unfortunately, the opponent has enough energy to throw here. And I'm not resisting the acid damage on my Center Scorch, meaning, unfortunately, I can't quite farm up to back-to-back charge moves. So instead, I go for Heat Wave. Heat Wave gets the KO, but we're 1 away from the next Heat Wave. And as a result, they can just wing attack farm me down. And I do end up losing that game. But GG's up on there into the next battle. I'm going to see Electrode in the lead. Now, I'm going to go for an X-Scissor straight away. I throw on CMP, winning CMP as well. X-Scissor is going to be shielded. No, never mind. That was not a CMP time once again. I guess I'm just missing fast moves when I'm watching this back in 2 times speed. But either way, I can now look to throw on CMP this time around. That is definitely CMP. As we go for an Octail, and Octail is going to be shielded. Now, this one, my entire team is fine into the Electrode, so I don't mind no shielding here. We can come in, dealing big damage with Embers, but they come in with a Waterfall Shadow for Alligator, which, of course, not ideal for me in the slightest. However, the opponent, thinking they can farm me down, we get to back-to-back lunges. That is huge for me. Lunge number 2 gets the KO, and now I swap into Sizzlipede, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Sableye. Now, this game is still not over here. Unfortunately, I think foul plays, by the time they reach back-to-back, will be enough damage to KO. I'm going to shield the first one anyways, and honestly, my win condition is if the opponent swaps back into Electrode, and they do exactly that. They allow me to reach another Heat Wave. Heat Wave is going to be neutral damage here, and it's enough damage to take out the Sableye, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's about there into the next battle. We're going to see Scolipede into Morpeko. So, a bit of an awkward matchup for me because, of course, Psychic Fangs is going to be super effective, and they are going to throw straight away. However, I can actually no-shield this, so I'm going to let the first one go through. I'm going to go for an Octail just because I feel like they are definitely going to shield here. Of course, previously, Scolipede's cheapest move was X-Scissor anyways, and now I'm going to swap into my Center Scorch. Of course, they're not boosted just yet, but I'm going to shield anyways, as Oriwhirl will pretty much one-shot me anyways. and the opponent is going to go straight for the Aura Wheel. Now they come in with Gorgeist. I don't know why I threw here. That was really bad timing on my end, but Heat Wave going to be shielded. Again, I throw on poor timing. I guess we had back-to-back, so it wasn't really that bad. And Heat Wave does KO, so I guess it doesn't really make a difference there. But they're going to come in with Jellicent, and unfortunately, this is where things do get a bit rough for me. Once again, unfortunately, everything other than Crunch from Centipede is going to be resisted. I tried to make a catch there. It does not work out. The opponent can go for a Surf. Surf gonna get the KO there. But let's see if we have a chance here. We're going to come in with a Centipede, and the opponent swaps out straight away into Morpeko. And we do have a Slither of Hope. Now, I'm going to shield this. This is, unfortunately, just a Psychic Fangs bait, which, obviously, I wish I didn't shield there. But I'm going to farm up to back-to-back crunches, and this is just going to be another Psychic Fangs. Now, I am debuffed already, so that does a lot of damage, but we can survive. And here, I make a huge mistake. I swap out. I thought they'd go for an extra fast move. I'm wrong. Should have just gone straight for Crunch. I think Centipede probably wins CMP up against Jellicent, and then, of course, you can see Center Scorch was just one fast move away from the next charge move, but because I swapped out there, Crunch, again, not enough damage to get the one shot, and I end up losing that game. But GG's up on there. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Feraligatr in the lead. So this is a fine matchup for me. We can go straight for Exeter, and Exeter is going to do quite a lot of damage in this matchup, and the opponent is going to no shield. And because we connect there, I can now just settle for an Octel the next time around. So we're going to look to overfarm just slightly, and then fire off the Octel. They are very low, so they might just no shield this anyways, and they're going to do exactly that. Then I come in with Primate, and this is fine with me. I can go straight for an Octel, and hopefully the opponent doesn't really overfarm too much, and they do just go straight for Rage Fist, and that's exactly what happens. So, of course, Rage Fist gonna get the KO, and I come in with the Center Scorch, and I'm gonna throw on CMP here. I do lose CMP, but that's fine. The opponent gonna go for a close combat, which does do quite a lot of damage there because they were boosted despite being resisted, but Heat Wave is gonna connect, and their final Pokemon is gonna be the world's smallest Clefable. We are going to go straight for a Heat Wave. Heat Wave does decent damage, and I don't need to shield here. Everything other than Swift or Psychic is resisted damage, and the opponent just goes for a Meteor Mash. Now, unfortunately, I do lose CMP here, so I'm going to shield this. I'm going to go for my Heat Wave, and then I will swap into my Center Scorch, as I should be able to win CMP that time around. So we swap out there, but I actually missed out on getting a one-turn swap, I believe. However, the opponent doesn't throw, instead committing to the farm down, and as a result, Heat Wave gets the KO. I get quite fortunate, but I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there. Into the next battle, I'm going to see Greninja in the lead. So they will just barely outpace me to a Hydro Cannon. They likely bait with a Night Sash, which is going to be quite unfortunate for me. But I'm also going to bait with an Octel. Of course, Greninja is very glassy, so even Octel resisted damage non-stab would do quite a lot of damage there. I'm going to bait again, actually. I definitely shouldn't bait here, and the opponent is going to call the bait this time around, so that is a huge mistake on my end. However, I'm hoping this is going to be a Night Slash catch, and it is. So at this point, I can no shield once again. The opponent going to go for another Night Slash there, which doesn't KO. But we can now come in, get the Poison Sting farm down. Not the best play there, but they're going to come in with a Macargo and hold on a second. I've got one away from back-to-back Octels. They shield the first, but I will be reaching the second, and this is double super effective. It does huge damage, but unfortunately, it's never going to put them into Ember farm down range, as, of course, they can now go for a Rock Tomb, debuff my attack stat, but they're going to come in with a Kanto Marowak. Now, of course, I'm debuffed here. Honestly, if this was a Shadow Marowak, potentially, I can flip this matchup here. As you can see, Heat Wave is going to do decent damage here. I would have gone for back-to-back Heat Waves, and unfortunately, up against the non-Shadow, it's just barely not enough damage there. Rock Slide easily gets the KO as it's double super effective, and I do lose that game. But GG's up on there into the final battle, leading into Shadow Annihilate. So a bit of an awkward matchup for me here because, well, I mean, my fast moves are resisted, but theirs are double resisted. I can go straight for an Octel. Octel is going to connect. It does decent damage, and the opponent's still not throwing yet, so I can reach a second Octel. Octel number 2, going to be shielded this time around, and the opponent is going to make a very nice catch there, catching Octel onto their Dunsparce. So Annihilate has a ton of energy, but we are going to see Dunsparce is now going to look to overfarm, which is not ideal for me, as X-Scissor is going to connect. It does big damage, and we can actually reach another Octel. That is so huge for me. Octel is going to grab the final shield. At this point, I'm just going to fully sacrifice the Sizzlepede, but the opponent blind throws a Drill Run, which is only neutral damage. They now come in with a Fire It, and I'm going straight for Heat Wave. Heatwave gonna connect, and now I'm gonna swap into my Center Scorch, and because Annihilate has so much energy, I kind of have to no shield here, and actually go for a Brick Break bait. I don't know if that means they're not on Swift, and instead they've got Trailblaze, but either way, I'm gonna take advantage. Heatwave gets the KO there, and let's see what the opponent wants to do. They come back in with Annihilate. They have very close to 100 energy here, but I'm not actually entirely sure how much energy they have, so of course, I'm gonna double shield, and then I don't know if I can go for a full farm down here, so I swap out into Sizzlipede. I bank the Charge Move. They can roll up, farm me down. They now come out with a Charge Move of their own. However, of course, Heatwave from Center Scorch wins CMP, and Heatwave gets the KO there, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.